Imagine being the star of your own movie, a CIA Black Ops human intelligence expert going back in time to 1996, assigned and responsible for closely monitoring and collecting intelligence on a man you're told by the highest levels of your leadership is extremely dangerous, but you've never heard of. Imagine being assigned to a human target in Sudan that was being closely followed by a broadly respected intelligence expert, Billy Wall. Imagine 6 years before the attacks of September 11th, 2001, that you were assigned to collect intelligence on the daily activities and networks of Osama Bin Laden. Imagine today having intimate details of the world's most infamous terrorist and having to live with the knowledge that your instincts were correct. Imagine knowing in your bones that this man would be the penultimate cause of the pain and suffering felt around the world, and the pursuit of the elimination of his life's work would cost the US trillions of dollars, and even worse, thousands of lives. Today we dive into a world of shadow games, extreme danger, and international intrigue with a man whose real-life exploits put even the most imaginative spy thriller movies to shame. Ric's new best-selling book, Black Ops: The Life of a CIA Shadow Warrior, offers a fascinating peek behind the CIA's classified curtain. It reveals the most indispensable role of human intelligence in geopolitics, an element often overlooked amidst our technology-driven world. Head over to ricprado.com for more details on the book. Fasten your seatbelts and prepare yourself as we journey into the clandestine universe of international espionage with the legendary Ric Prado. My name is Nick. This is The NDS Show.
We're trying to build and strengthen democracy in Central America because democracy brings peace and communism brings war.
Is the jihad directed against the U.S. government or United States troops in Arabia? What about U.S. civilians in Arabia?
In 88 and 89, Bin Laden's name began to appear.
Ric Prado. Why does the United States need Black Ops?
Well, the intelligence process is quite complicated, but there are times when the U.S. hand has to be hidden in order not to compromise what we're doing, whether it's undermining an enemy or anything like that. And the agency is the only government component that has Title 50 authorities that come directly from the President of the United States. And, I've never broken a U.S. law, but I've broken a lot of overseas laws because as long as my president says, go do this and do it, we're good with that. So it is simply another tool for collecting intelligence or for doing covert action. So Black Ops are really covert actions where perfect example is the Contra stuff that I talk about in the book, where the Sandinista, Regan takes over, he declares war on communism. He signs a finding, just like Bush did after 9/11. They sign a lethal finding that says you are allowed to go after these people, and that's what Black Ops are.
Well, awesome. You mentioned the kind of the process of intelligence, and I want to dive into the book a little bit later. But first, I kind of want to start with kind of my unique perspective. There's a lot of other great podcasts with you out there. There's one on Concrete from Danny Jones, which is fantastic. I recommend people check that out. We'll put a link in the description. But as an intelligence person, I'm always curious about what the intelligence process is like. Can you tell me maybe why human intelligence is so powerful? Like, why is it so important to have boots on the ground insight?
Yeah, the problem has long been that technology. We want to rely on technology, eavesdrop on things and penetrate things, and that's fine. I mean, intelligence is a team sport. Everybody's got their pattern. They have to do it in order to get to the goal line. Uh, but the difference between human and an intercept is that human comes from, in our case, comes from assets or agents that have been recruited. They have been tested, they have been vetted, their information through the process grows. So if you give me good information today and that's validated tomorrow, your source description goes higher. So you have a controlled source that you ops test, that you polygraph, and you have usually you have some very valuable stuff that comes out of them that you're not going to find in cyberspace.
Yeah, and I find that any really good intelligence person has to have kind of a level 2 understanding of the other ints. My background is in geospatial intelligence, but I know the absolute best intelligence that I can get, that I can provide, is cursory at best, because I'm looking from a distance. I'm using remote sensing, ISR, that sort of thing. But working with the human teams always provides the best results, because they just the level of depth and knowledge of what's happening on the ground is so much better. You talked a bit about working with human. So human is the only intelligence source that works with uh, people, right? Humans. They have emotions, right? It's not a sensor. It's not some satellite system. They're humans. Like, can you maybe tell me about working with the chaos of emotions that must be involved in these human intelligence operations? I mean, you have people that are risking their lives to go collect intel, whether they know it or not, wittingly or not. What is that like, balancing those emotions?
Well, it is the foundation of what the agency really does. That's our main job, is just to, spot, recruit, develop, recruit, and run and vet assets. The process, the emotion part of it is we look for strengths. We try to recruit for strengths. That's not the case with the Russians. That's not the case with the Chinese. They're very big on recruiting on weaknesses. In other words, a honey trap. They drug you, put you in a bed with 3 girls or 3 guys or whatever, and then that extortion aspect of it. I never saw that in my agency in the almost 25 years that I did in there. That's just not us. Being Americans, we have an upper hand, because whether people voice it for real or not, anybody who's out there fighting for freedom for their own country sees us as the guys with the white hat. They don't see anybody else out there. So that part of it is what we look for: somebody who's got compatible ideology that we can work with, because it benefits them also. The ideal candidate, and again, they run the gamut, okay? But the ideal agent is the individual that has access to the information that you need and realizes that working with you, he can make a difference to the positive of whatever his cause is. And so it becomes a mutual agreement. Those people tend to be a lot easier to handle. They're more dedicated. They're easier to train because they're focused. And but it's a game of finesse. Not to us, it's sort of the same. The buttons that I push with the Minister of Interior that I recruited in one place is very different than the terrorist that I included in the other place.
Right.
Or the and so that's the art of recruiting and running assets. There's a science part. The recruiting cycle, like I said, spot, develop, recruit, and run, and all that. But the art form is being able to look at that individual and through conversational find out what makes him or her lose sleep at night.
Right.
And that's what you go after. That's what you try to say, hey, I have a way to let you sleep better in the future. Because of what's going on in your country, what's going on with it, how it's affecting your family, and so on. So, that's a 2-minute from a 4-month course. So
uh, no problem. You guys got this. You're all experts now. You just heard it from Ric Prado, so you're good.
Well,
You mentioned this a bit, but that where the United States is seen as the white hat intelligence, right? Is there anything else that might be surprising about the way our black ops philosophy or tradecraft, you could say, play out in the world stage that people maybe don't understand?
Well, I mean, the black ops. Let's use the Nicaragua incident there. For the first 14 months of that program, I was the only CIA officer allowed to be in the camps, for the simple reason that I had the military background, but I'm also a native Spanish speaker and I look Hispanic. So I was there as a Honduran major, and the Hondurans were our supporters. They were the only people that knew who I really was. But that's how we operate often, is through help of another country, be able to carry out an operation where we cannot flaunt the U.S. hand. Now, 2.5 years into the program, it was the best unkept secret in the world. Everybody knew that we were involved. It was now an open thing. It was in Congress and everything else. And then we started having, regular American specialists come in and help out. But that's probably the best example of black ops. We've done them in many cases. But at the end of the day, what you're really looking for is human. Black ops cannot happen without having the right human information to support it.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point, and I want to talk about this later on, about the current state of intelligence and this kind of push for more transparency, which I'm all for. You're seeing this explosion of open source intelligence and the things you can do with OSINT these days. I mean, imagine, all the work you've done over your career, how much more information you would have going into those operations, with the plethora of data we have available to us in the open source intelligence community. You would have been just more prepared. In all of your experience, before we kind of jump into the book a bit, I'm always curious about the counterintelligence game. Counterintelligence is often referred to as a forest of mirrors, right? It's the thing you always see in the movies, where this spy is versus this spy trying to catch this spy. Do you have any experience running into foreign counterintelligence elements?
Well, look, the foreign intelligence element is a consideration in any operation, especially human, that you're doing. Okay, we have CI specialists. We have people that actually make a career of helping us look for the counterintelligence threat. And I'll give you an example. When I was chief of operations at the Counterterrorist Center after 9/11, we would have meetings once a week, and there will be a list of assets that we were going to review. And you'd have somebody from the station that actually flew in, usually the case officer, he or she who handles that particular source would be at the table. The head of reports will be at the table, because that's how we verify a lot of corroborate and verify a lot of the information assets. So through our reports officers are there. We had a CI individual, and I would head the meeting. Well, the idea is to see if there's things that we're missing. Is there something that raised our suspicion? Have we gotten laxed? Do we have our stuff squared away? And like I said, reporting is one of the biggest. Ops testing is essential. We operationally test. We give them a task that we know the answer to before they get it, kind of stuff. And if they do it correctly, that's a plus on their side. If they don't, it's a minus. So all these things get taken into consideration, and it is a very, very elaborate team-oriented process.
Okay. So, I mean, I keep hearing the word team come up in what you're saying, and I love that, because I think a lot of times in movies and things, intelligence is always depicted as some one rogue person going and doing something. But in my experience, it's all about a team. Like, we do everything as a team. Communication has to work properly across elements. and everything we do is a part of one combined team for that mission. So let's hop into the book a bit. So here's the book. I have the book here, and I'll put it up here. We'll put links in the description so people can buy it, check it out. The book is Black Ops: The Life of a CIA Shadow Warrior. This book, first of all, the book is freaking awesome. Like, just go buy it. Don't look back. If you're into history, if you're into the intelligence game, if you're into just having a good situational awareness of what's going on around you, you need to read this book, and you need to go get it right now. So Rick, first, let's start out with, why'd you write the book?
You know, we all dream about doing something in our lives. You know, I wanted to be special military, which I accomplished, and I wanted to be an intel officer, which I accomplished. Never did I ever thought of having author, much less best-selling author, on my title. But you know, when I retired from the agency and my world slowed down enough, and actually, you know, post Blackwater actually too, because I was doing a lot of work there too. You know, my life was a blur. You know, you capture everything, but you don't have the time for introspection that you have once you retired a little bit, at least. During that time, the process for me was I started realizing how much it irked me, the reputation that my agency has in the media, especially Hollywood, and even more importantly, how derogatory the descriptions of CIA operations officers is out there in the public domain. So, you know, we have 140 stars now on the wall. We're a very small agency. And those 140 stars deserve that there's kids and grandkids have a different view or a realistic view. Because I don't pull, you read the book, I don't pull punches. When they're screw ups, I'm there. Yeah. You know, when politics kicks in, that's one of my pet peeves. I'm there. But yeah, that's the process for my getting to writing the book, was trying to educate as many people as possible about what we really do and how we really do it. And so, you know, these kids and grandkids, what did you do during the war, Daddy? They have something that is realistic, not Jason Bourne or American Made or any of this other stuff out there.
Yeah. So sounds like what you're really trying to do is destroy misconception, you know, shed some light on a traditionally dark area, right? Everything from the CIA, from the 50s on with the CIA has obviously been conspiratorial and all this. There's a lot of crazy stuff about the CIA out there, only because it's crazy, right? I mean, the real life is crazier than the fiction oftentimes, and your book is a perfect example. So maybe let's walk through a little bit of it. I don't want to give it away. Look, you got to read this book. It's just it's brilliant in every level. But maybe let's jump right into where your first assignment. So you from the streets of Cuba to the streets of Miami to the CIA. So you got to read and understand his story there. But maybe we can jump into Honduras. What were the left and right limits of your assignment there in Honduras?
That was the beauty of that assignment. You know, we were making it up as we went along. And since I was the only guy in the field, I had a huge responsibility of honestly reporting back to my chain of command. There was only 5 people when we started this program. Colonel Ray was my boss, legendary guy at the agency. And so I got into the agency primarily because I had the paramilitary medical training. They needed somebody for our special operations that was both a paramilitary guy and who had advanced medic capabilities. I rode rescue for Metro for 6 years while I was in the reserves. So that's what exposed me to the agency. So when Regan took over and declared war on communism in Central and Latin America overall, they called me up because they did not have at the time a single native Spanish-speaking paramilitary officer because of the post-Vietnam attrition. That's how I got called in. I went into Honduras with no additional training other than my street smarts and my paramilitary training, and a very good boss who guided me through every step. My job was to go to the camps, check the realities there, make friends, make them dependent on my confidence, and provide them with every single thing that they needed. And you got to realize that not only did I bring in logistics and medical supplies and doctors and intelligence, for the first 14 months, I was the only guy that could train them on everything from headspace and timing on a 50 cal to how do you fire an RPG-7 or a law, those kind of things. I literally would go from camp to camp teaching this. I used to do 2 camps a week, Monday through Friday, sleeping in a jumbo hammock for 3 years. And it was the most fun I've had with my clothes on.
Do you ever miss that jungle hammock?
I do. I miss that experience, and I relish it so much because you got to understand it. Because for me, now I'm a 30-year-old man in the Nicaraguan border, helping people that were affected by communism, just like my family was when I was a kid back in Cuba. I am now fighting the same monster because it was the Soviet Union through Cuba, now through Nicaragua, to Salvador, and so on. And I'm in a position where I know I'm making a difference by the individuals that I'm training, the operations that I'm carrying out. You know about the Puerto Cabezas scuba team that I put together. All those things are right there, and I think that that's one of the things that's good about the book is that there's a lot of sexy stuff that people go, wow, but they're real. It's none of this. I'm fighting 15 guys and I beat them all up. That doesn't work. So for me, the parameters were great. It was such a great job because it was so rewarding that the people that I was training were all there for a very personal reason. They needed freedom for their country. They needed freedom for their family. They needed freedom for their religion. One of the biggest pet peeves was how much they cracked down on the Catholic Church and beat up the priests and burned churches down. And the atrocities went on and on. So each one of these individuals had a personal reason for living in this incredibly terrible, circumstances, and the threat of being, the border. It's a very porous thing. The Sandinistas are in and out, and we were in and out. So it was very rewarding period for my life. Yes.
You mentioned a bit about the Contras, right? This is who you're talking about here. And you've talked about it on some other podcasts. We don't need to go too crazy into it, but what do you want people to know about them as people? Because if you look at a lot of historical texts on who these people were, they're not always shown in the greatest light. And I'd just be curious to know your thoughts, having lived with them. And
well, it goes back to being the guy on the ground and really seeing what they're doing. I mean, the Contras were divided in 3 semi-geographical groups. The northern, the FDN, the northern part of the program, were led by former Somoza guys who were not simpatico to Somoza, and they were now, trying to regain the freedom of their country. That was the leadership. Everybody below them were actually peasants from the west side of Nicaragua, mostly, and extending down, 3/4 of the way down to the lakes. That was the area of operations for that part of the leg. The southern front of the Contras were actually dissolution Sandinistas that had taken up arms under Eden Pastora and a couple of other leaders, and started their war from the southern end because they knew that they were on the northern end. Eventually, we were able to get them to work together, and that took some doing. Then you had on the East Coast, you had the formidable Mosquito Indians, Mosquito, Sumo, and Rama. There were three tribes there, and they're Native Americans, and they've always wanted autonomy. They want to be a separate state. The government will not do it not because they care about them, but because that's where all the gold mines are that the country gets a lot of revenue from.
There you go.
But the Mosquitos were natural hunters, natural stalkers, natural warriors. They knew guns. They knew how to, be covert, how to be, jungle hunting kind of stuff. So they were easier to train. And they had a very pure spirit also because they brought so much to the Contra fight when it came to politics. What you alluded to was when you start trying to run operations through a political optic, you're going to screw it up. Politics and ops, whether they're intel ops or military ops, they don't cohabitate very well. So, yeah, for the overall effort, these individuals were patriots. They were anti-communist. They were religious, God-loving individuals that adore their families. I would say that was at least 90% of the people that I dealt with in the Contras, north, south, and east. Because I mean, I did them all.
Right.
It was extremely rewarding to see how pure the reasons for being there. You know, you take people say, well, you know, he was a lieutenant with the Somoza. Well, lieutenant in the Nicaraguan army back then, you know, as a kid that just, you know, probably graduated from high school and
right.
2 semesters of college or something. So they're not part of the ruling elite. And these young men are in a camp, living in a, you know, thatched hutch, getting shot at every couple of weeks because Sandinistas would make incursions or they were making incursions. And it sure as hell wasn't for the money because they weren't getting any.
Right.
So, yeah. Was there a 2% out there or a 3% out there that was not benign? Absolutely. I don't know anything about the alleged drug trafficking that, you know, some people say, well, you know, some of the countries were selling drugs in order to keep the program afloat while, you know, the Boland Amendment and stuff like that kicked it off the rails. But I do know personally, and you read the book, there were 2 sub-commanders that went rogue after the main commander, who was one of my favorites, Suicida, fell ill. And these guys became bandidos. They were cattle rustlers. They were stealing cattle. They were forcing people into town. Right. And I was sent to bring them back, and I did. I brought them both back. I renditioned both of them over a 2-day period and almost got killed doing it. So there were some bad elements there. But even in that particular incident, it was just a handful of the guys that had taken over that camp. Once they saw one of them leave, they all started cooperating and allowing me to get to the second guy, which I did. So,
you mentioned kind of these rogue elements. I think in any sufficiently large group of people, there's always going to be knuckleheads, right? There's always going to be outliers that are doing stupid stuff. I mean, you see that with
you see that in our own military, Nicholas. I mean, you know, we literally have motorcycle gangs in the military. We have gangs inside our military. Yeah. People don't realize that. Yeah. You know, it's made up of people, and you're going to have people that get through the process that shouldn't be there, but they are.
Yeah, I live about 2 hours away from Fort Bragg, and the stories that I hear about Fort Bragg I was stationed there as well, but the stories I hear these days are just like head scratchers, you know, like man bites alligator type stuff. Very cool. So you mentioned that you came pretty close to death down there. Can you maybe tell that story about how you were able to kind of thwart that danger?
You know, it's classic human 101. And I had never been through a course, but I was, like I said, I was a street savvy guy. And, you know, my dad taught me, my dad had friends at every level. And I learned that, you know, how to make friends. And this particular thing, what happened was 6 months before the actual incident, this young nobody, he was just, you know, like an 18, 19-year-old kid that was fighting there. He was no rank whatsoever. He came to me and said, Major, my wife is very ill. And, I need a medicine that I can't afford at the little village down here. So, you know, I reached into my pocket, took $20 worth of lempiras, which back then was a fortune for them. I went, here you go take care of your wife. So when I went to get these guys, I grabbed the first guy right on the spot. He met me outside the camp. That was mistake number 1. I sent his bodyguard on an errand, and next thing he knows, he was inside the helicopter, disarmed, and going back to Tegucigalpa. But then I had to go to the camp because I needed to talk to the folks there, and I needed to see where the other SOB was at. And I'm at the camp now. I'm walking in and walking around like I've always done because I own the camps. Literally, it's one of these cartoonish kind of things. Behind a bush, I hear this psst, psst, mi mayor, major, major. He says, they're going to try to kill you tonight. And I said, why? He says, because the people that are trying to defend the two guys, including the one that you already renditioned, they want you out of the picture. And I first took it with a grain of salt. I said, thank you, really appreciate it. If you hear anything else, let me know. But then I'm going like, I don't know, that's far-fetched. Well, every time I would go to the camps, they would always put me in the middle of the camp because they want to protect me. The last thing that they want is for their food source or ammo source to get captured if the camps get raided. And they got raided several times. You read the book. I got in a couple of scraps there for that. This time they put me and the two guys that were with me in a hutch at the edge of the camp, right where the wood, where the border, the wood line started and the mountain started. And the old that's a clue. And I said,
right.
Okay, now I know this is probably for real. So I briefed the guys on what I found out, and when they as soon as it got dark, we crawled out of the back window, low crawl into the woods, went up and set up an observation post. We set up our perimeter. We had brought every bullet we had, every grenade we had, and we set up there. I said, well, if they're going to come, they're going to have to come and get us. And they're not going to catch us in our sleep, and I'm going to take half of them with me. So that boasted my guys, and they were ready to rock. Sure as hell, right around midnight, you hear the commotion down there. You see, all of a sudden, you start seeing flashlights going into the cabin, and they are very pissed off because Major Alex is not there. They probably looked up in the mountain and went, "Oh shit, that's where he's at. I ain't going to go get him because he's the guy that trained me. He knows what I know and what I don't know." And I know he's got the high ground, and I know he's going to be hunkered down and let it go. So the next morning, as soon as the sun started coming up, we came back down, got in the hutch, went out to breakfast, just like nothing had happened. And it was the most surreal situation I've ever been in because there were just a handful of guys that if looks could kill, I wouldn't be here.
Right.
But the majority of the people in the camp were looking at me like, you're something else. You guys are something else. We're so glad that you're with us. Kind of, that, and of course, like I said, they facilitated me abducting the second guy who was armed. His bodyguard tried to intercede, and I dissuaded him from getting into a losing fight and brought him home thanks to these guys. And the rest of the camp resuscitated tremendously, new leadership, and they kept doing great things.
Yeah, so that's super interesting, and I bet I'm guessing here that once those guys were gone, there was probably maybe some improved morale with some of those people that probably knew that they were being sketchy, right?
Without a doubt. I mean, these guys went under military trial, and one of the things that they were convicted of was murder and rape. They took one of the opposing sub-commanders that was trying to oppose them. They tied him to a tree. They raped his wife in front of him, and then they killed him.
Oh, God.
So these guys, they suffer the consequences through their own military chain of command, through their own, process. But the rest of the people were elated that now they could go back to what they were really doing, which was trying to fight the Sandinistas.
Well, good riddance. I imagine a Honduran prison in the 1980s probably wasn't the most luxurious place you want to be.
They probably didn't spend too much time in a prison.
I gotcha. Very cool. So let's maybe jump forward in the book a bit to the Bin Laden days, because look, 9/11 on my life has had a huge impact. I joined the military shortly after 9/11, and I think a lot of people in my generation that served in the military did so because of 9/11, and the story here is just spectacular to just think about it and rack your head on. So I was wondering if maybe you could walk us through kind of how you got assigned to this and what's going through your head.
I had just gotten my GS-15 and I had just come out of Seoul, Korea. And I was back at the Counterterrorist Center, which was where my heart belonged. I mean, I was a paramilitary officer, home base in the paramilitary group, which is the special forces for the agency, all taken from the U.S. military special forces. So I had the Palestinian branch, and the chief of operations, the then chief of operations, called me in and said, "We're starting a virtual station." And I go, "Jeff, what the hell is a virtual station?" He goes, "Well, it's a new thing. It's going to be you will be outside of the building, but in CONUS, and you would be running like a task force station. You'll have the authorities to send your own traffic. You don't have to coordinate with anybody. You can task everybody on this particular topic." I'm going, okay. So what would my role be? He said, "You would be the deputy chief of station. You would be the senior ops guy, because Mike Scheuer was the analyst that knew all about this individual that I still didn't know anything about." And Jeff says to me, he says, "Look, your name came up, and I support it. Are you willing to take it? It's going to be, a hell of a job, but take it." I said, "Oh, absolutely." I said, I only got one question. I said, "Who are we after?" He says, "Osama bin Laden." And I went, "Who?" And he laughed. He says, "Exactly." 6 months later, we had at least tenfold information on him being able to task assets and get very focused and aggressive. And also, I did a lot of traveling to countries that I'm not going to mention, but allied countries where they had insight, briefing their liaison, our liaison services, the local intels and special military. So the irony of this is that we started the Bin Laden Task Force real early January of '96. We actually put it together in late '95, but we actually moved out early '96, and we were like 8 people. There was another case officer who was an Arabic speaker. There was an FBI rep, and the rest were analysts. The rest of the people there were analysts and targeting officers. And at the time, we had incredible amount of information because he was in Khartoum. And we had a legendary Green Beret guy who became a legendary agency guy, Billy Waugh, who unfortunately we lost a couple of months ago. Billy was the head of surveillance in Khartoum, making book on Bin Laden. And on his spare time, he's the guy that captured the Jackal. Carlos Elis Ramirez, the Jackal. Just a phenomenal individual, but the amount of information that he was providing with photographs, assessing their capabilities. You got a guy that knows, hey, can we take these guys? And time again, he would come back to us and say, "We can get him. If we do it this way, we can get him. We can render this guy. Not just kill him. Kill him would have been probably too easy. But the idea would have been to render him into interrogation, because by then we knew without a doubt that he was fomenting the camps, financing the camps, the training, even overhead supported this, that the camps, the training that was going there was subversive activity. And, you had volunteers, you had people that had been recruited, you had all sorts information really indicating. And the administration just, no, well, we don't have enough proof that he's a bad guy. Just think for a minute. If in 1997, early 98, we would have rendered Bin Laden, what a difference this world would have been. Because the first thing that would have happened was the attack on the Cole.
Right.
That was his masterpiece. The bombing of our 2 embassies in Africa simultaneously that killed hundreds of people probably wouldn't happen. And if you projected enough, even 9/11 might have never even been a consideration. I always, when the topic comes up, people say, "Well, you mentioned that you could have killed them. That's immoral." And I say, well, it depends on how you want to look at it. Let me ask you something. What do you think that the millions of people that died under Nazi rule would have thought if somebody would have put a bullet in Hitler's head in 1939?
Right.
So this is the same thing. We allowed a monster to grow strength and become a formidable opponent. And until he bled us in the thousands, that's when the gloves finally came off. We could have avoided a lot of American blood.
Yeah, thousands of lives and trillions of dollars later, and then we finally get him there in a Abbottabad compound in Pakistan. As a GS-15, I mean, was there any? I mean, I get it. Like, looking back, hindsight's 20/20, right? 2020, obviously if I was there, I would have done this.
Yeah.
But that's just not true, right? I mean, you don't know what you don't know. You can't predict the future. No one can, including people that pick stocks. I'll throw that out there. But was there ever a time during that when you just had like a feeling like this, like we need to do this? Or was there ever any thought of just, telling the leadership it was an accident, something happened?
No,
No.
I mean, look, that's one of the myths that I try to dispel with the agency. Okay. I've never seen a rogue activity in the agency. You got to understand the agency gets the blame for everything from killing Kennedy to the Bay of Pigs fiasco, which was a screw up by that administration, not by the planners. And what people do not understand is the amount of oversight that exists in the agency.
Right.
You just can't say I'm going to go do an op and my boss doesn't know about it. I mean, that's it happens in the movies. That's the only place that it happens. Now, what did happen? We kept taking this up to the 7th floor, explaining why we were planning. Here's an option. Right. Here's another option, and they were taking it up the ladder. But that administration at the time was not buying. There's nothing that the agency can do. And again, in a black operation like rendering Bin Laden,
right? Because
remember, going into Khartoum is an act of war.
Sure.
So going in there and grabbing this guy, or surreptitiously going in there and killing this guy, was a substantial endeavor that you just cannot do that from on your own pocket. Hey, I'm going to take 30 days leave. I'll be back in a month and go kill Bin Laden. That's fallacy. That's only happens in the movies.
What was your gut telling you at the time?
No, he was a bad guy. We started calling him the Godfather really early on because what differentiated him from the other terrorists, besides the fact that he had $50 million of his own money and the fact that his dad is one of the wealthiest guys in Saudi Arabia, the biggest construction company in probably in the world, he was extorting a lot of money from Saudis and other Arab countries that say, hey, you need to donate to the cause, or, there's going to have these things happening in your government, in your place. So we knew that all this was going on. We knew that he was very wealthy, very well connected, and very, very, very dedicated. He had, like most young folks, me included, during your younger years, you do stupid stuff. But he became a man of faith. And I will tell you, I respect my enemy. I don't hate my enemy. Sure. I respect my enemy. I'll kill them, but, not because I hate them, but because they're trying to kill me or mine. Right. So Bin Laden was a believer. And that's a powerful force to have behind in our business, north or south, or east or west. Believing in what you're doing makes a difference, makes a huge difference. So he was literally the first guy that reached out from his organization, Al-Qaeda, to other components out there and provided them with intelligence, provided them with money, provided them with support. And it's the old, hey, I'm going to help you now, but someday I may need a favor from you. I need you to help me bomb this embassy in Africa, whatever it was, because a lot of these were joint efforts led by Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda actually means the base. So that was his perspective, to create a base of terrorism, like the brains of an octopus, and then all these tentacles that come out of it. So there was no doubt in any of our minds. Mike Scheuer was livid. I mean, Mike Scheuer, unfortunately, became very bitter and disappointed, rightfully so. But, we are a military structured organization. GS-15 is a colonel, SIS is a general, that kind of stuff. And you don't walk up to the 5-star general on the top floor and say, the blood of these people is in your hands. That's just not the way we do things. And I think that to be fair to our leadership at the time, they were not getting the traction above them with the administration. It wasn't them not willing to at least present it, but Mike took it very personal.
Man, that's really, just crucially interesting to me, because I've been involved in operations and I've seen the modern version of what you do, or what your career has been. with drones and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
And I understand that you might have some thoughts on that, but I've been inside high intensity national security mission operations, and I know for a fact that when things are hot, when things are happening all the time, there's a saying in poker is when you start losing or the cards aren't going your way, you start betting and being overly aggressive. It's called being on tilt. And I've seen it in mission operations where people are on tilt, right? Things are happening and everything, you see blood everywhere. You start to see it. And having experienced that into the restraint that you're describing is conflicting in my mind because I've seen both sides of the fence. So I just think it's really compelling and really, really an interesting thing to talk about.
But clarifying that a little bit, I'm not saying that we did not have internal fights that, hey, we need to go kill this guy. I said that myself every other day. We need to get this guy. We need to get this guy. Mm-hmm. And the pushback was there. My point was Ric Prado and Mike Scheuer could have not done, send out a cable to Billy Waugh and to him and say, kill him.
Right.
Billy, like I said, he was a very, very dear friend of mine. He's all over my book too. But Billy used to sit down when the topic would come up because I debriefed the hell out of him because he was the guy that, knew Khartoum and knew Bin Laden. And he told me one day, he says, Rick, I got so close to him, I could have killed him with a rock. Oh. And if you know Billy Waugh, you know that he could.
He probably could have. Yeah.
At any age. But yeah, I mean, the fight was on, and I referred to this a little earlier. You cannot run special military or intel operations through a political optic. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and unfortunately, our agencies are very politicized, which is the downfall of any agency is to become politicized.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that you're actually seeing that so much. I mean, I followed the whole Twitter files things pretty closely, and in terms of what the intelligence agencies were doing, colluding with Twitter to censor American citizens and things like that. In the intelligence community, if you want to spy on an American citizen, fine, but you got to go to a FISA court and get stamped by a judge.
There you go.
And they just seem to be circumventing that. I think there's probably, when you climb the ranks in these intelligence agencies, you get up there, and maybe this is something you can talk about because GS-15's up there. I mean, that's way up there. Maybe you could talk about this a bit. There's a sense to me that at a certain level, people do start to play politics. They start to drop their ethical standards and do things because they want to get the next ambassador position or they want a role in the White House. They want favors for them, so they start to do favors for campaigns and things like that. And this is exactly what happened with the FBI and Hillary Clinton and all that stuff. What is that reality? Am I right, or am I just projecting?
No, you're spot on in several things. First of all, I was a GS-15 in 1995. I retired as an SIS too, so I was
there you go.
I had been a chief of station with that rank, and I was chief of the Koreas, which was a deputy chief of division at the time that I was there. So I got to go to the 7th floor. I got to brief at the 7th floor, and lucky for me, I mean, the biggest I received some really nice commendations and medals when I retired. But the biggest medal of honor for me is my guys coming up to me and go, boss, you're the only senior officer we've worked with that is first through the door, first on the mat, first picking up brass, and first getting in the face of people that don't want to do what they're supposed to do. That became a sticking point for me because I did see what you're talking about. Individuals coming up the ranks. But again, it's not the majority.
Right.
The majority of the people are still trying to do God's work, protect this country, protect our people. But there are people, and I've heard them say it. We have sources inside our own building, and friends will come up to you and go say, yeah, so and so was just saying that the problem with what you're trying to do is that if you guys succeed, nobody's going to know, and they get no credit. But if you guys fail, they're going to get fired. And I'm going like, well, that talks about lack of testicular fortitude and backbone, hey? So it's real. I think taking it to the current point, part of the problem is the leadership. Okay, under John Brennan, who was not an operations officer, he was an analyst, and subsequently, before and after, actually, the agency was very politicized. It began to be politicized, and here's my point: if you are appointed by President X to that position, to a position of leadership of a federal agency, and you do not belong to that fraternity, who is your loyalty to?
Yeah, the president.
It isn't to your people, and it is a political. It's like a political appointee ambassador. It's one of these guys that he donated a bunch of money, and now he's the ambassador in Paris, gets to put that title in his name, and blah 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 blah. So it's frustrating, of course, because it does become politics. But we have the talent, internal talent, that could have risen to the ranks and be directors of Central Intelligence. Cofer Black,
right?
Legendary. He was our the chief of the Counterterrorist Center when 9/11 happened. A dear friend of mine. I would follow him to hell and back. Jose Rodriguez, who replaced him, another legendary. These are guys that could run the agency with their eyes closed.
Right.
And they have one additional thing that political appointees don't have: credibility with the troops.
Yeah.
If you've never sat in a car with a terrorist that you recruited, like I have, how do you empathize as my boss, who just came from Harvard or whatever, with what my family goes through when I come home after a day like that? How do you understand the risk, the kind of preparation that you have to run those kind of operations? The sympathy isn't there from the top, and definitely the admiration is not there from the bottom for them.
Yeah, and that's such a great point. I was there when David Petraeus was
I know
in charge. And as a military person, I admired Petraeus because all the his whole thing, right? Great leadership in the military. And then he had to retire with some sketchy thing, he had an affair or something, cheated on his wife, which is awful. And then Leon Panetta came in, whole different story there. But Leon, he was an appointee, just like kind of appointed, but everybody kind of loved him. He's a very charismatic person. So he was always walking the halls and being very interactive and engaged with everyone.
That's what a politician is.
And that was exactly my point, Rick.
You just described a politician, yeah.
But when you get into the ops, right, it was right. And I think it's you're talking about a crucial element of being a leader in any capacity, which is you have to be able to empathize with the people that you're leading, or else you're not gonna care as much, right? And I think that's just such a crucial thing for a leader of any agency. Like, man, you got to at least work there for a bit or something. I mean, I don't know. There's got to be something done about that. So very good. So eventually you did retire, though. So maybe you can tell, like, why did you decide to retire, and what was behind that decision?
Yeah, I had, by other people's description, a stellar career. I climbed through the ranks pretty quickly. I made SIS-2 when I was in 99, made SIS-1 in 98 when I took over the Koreas. I went back to CTC and became the chief of operations for CTC. 9/11 happened. We worked extremely hard and extremely successful. I like to point out that as much as I admire and I'm a part of our special operations fraternity, first boots on the ground in Afghanistan were the agencies. The first Green Beret helicopters that came in, God bless them, they were lifesavers, but it was my guys on the ground vectoring them in. So it was a very dynamic time. We were using the Predators. And,
Mm-hmm.
very early on with the Hellfire missiles, we were hitting them from everywhere. But what I noticed was that we were kicking the crap out of them in war theaters. But I had learned through my years in counterterrorism that the real soft underbelly of any criminal organization, and to me, terrorism is about as criminal as it gets. The soft underbelly is their support mechanisms. Why? Because their support mechanisms have to have a visible person. You have to have a persona. You cannot be the chief of logistics for Al Qaeda living in a cabin, in a cave in Afghanistan. You have to live in Europe or Latin America or wherever where you can get access to documents, where you can get access to medical, where you could get financial support, where you can pass information, obtain communications equipment, all that stuff. So I came up with a program, a very robust program, that was briefed to the Vice President of the United States and Condoleezza Rice, and they both approved the program. Well, needless to say, cry havoc and let loose the dogs of war. We were on it like white on rice. We were all over these guys, making book on them, surveillance, knowing where they were. Some cases working with liaisons, some cases unilaterally. But the bottom line is we stood up a program that was meant to be, and it was, an intelligence collection program with teeth. And let me explain what I'm talking about. Yeah. What was frustrating for me as chief of ops during 9/11, especially with my Bin Laden background, was we were hearing all this kind of chatter. We knew that there was something going on. We knew that they were going to hit us. We know that it was a big deal. We were pretty sure that it was going to be in the United States, but we did not know what it was or when it was or where it was. So the theory behind my program was give me 3 leaders of every terrorist organization that is part of their elite support mechanism and let me make book on them. I go out there, I get patterns of life. I know who they're screwing, where they eat, what mosque they go, where they live, what car they drive, all that stuff we had on these guys. And then imagine this. Let's use Hezbollah as an example. Let's say we're doing this, we have our 3 guys in Hezbollah. And all of a sudden we start getting that kind of chatter that, oh my God, they're doing something, they're planning something, it's imminent, blah, blah, blah. Well, imagine what happens to any clandestine organization if 3 of your mainline unrelated support mechanisms get neutralized. You feel you're penetrated. You're going to hit the brakes. You're going to disrupt. Yeah. CTC's motto is disrupt, prevent, and disrupt. That's what we're supposed to do. We're not into vindictive activity, although killing Bin Laden was, and rightfully so. Very proud of that one. But yeah, it was. It came full circle for us to see how things had developed, and when the program was briefed and the vice president approves it, and my 7th floor is going through briefing after briefing, and they're saying there's no doubt, and this is a quote. This is a quote, and it's in the book. The then DDO said, "Mr. Director, there's no doubt in our mind that Prado and his team can not only do this, but they can get away with it." I'm going like, hallelujah. And then he says, however, we have to look at the political ramifications of doing that at this time. So after a couple of those where, I had picked of the litter, they had given me some of the brightest, best background officers that I've ever worked with, all retired SIS 4s and 5s a few years ago. I couldn't keep these guys. We're doing all the sexy repelling upside down, pitching grenades and driving cars and all but that's not what the agency's main core mission is. These guys and gals had careers. So I went to management and I said, look, I will not be a paper tiger. I'm not here just to brief all. And I shut down the programs, and shortly thereafter I retired.
So is it safe to say that you wanted to take more action than was allowed?
Oh,
is that
by all means.
safe way to sum it up?
Absolutely. Look, we had, and everybody always call, the vulgar description of what we were trying to do was CIA's head squad, like a kill squad. And nothing could be further from the truth. We were collecting intelligence on bad guys, coming up with methods of how to disrupt them. And I will tell you, one of my favorite methods was put something in their car. We had training on how to pick a lock on a car, get in there, put inert explosives and fuses or drugs or whatever the hell we wanted to, and then have somebody call the cops. And will they beat the case? Yeah, probably. But they're out of commission for 2 years.
Yeah.
So it spread the gamut. Yeah, there was people that we said, if you want this guy taken out, we can do this. We have the training. We have the personnel. We have, led by me, that we are willing and able to do this. And we have proven it by demonstrating to you when you visit us in training what we are capable of doing.
So there was no taste to even just disrupt the operations? I mean...
Yep. No.
Like not even take a couple of minions off the street for a year.
No, like you heard me say, Prado could get away with it and get her done, but the political ramifications, and the concern was, I mean, I understand their concern, but it doesn't justify.
Sure.
It's like, I could understand the fear of somebody jumping out of an airplane, but if you're part of the 82nd Airborne, guess what? You're supposed to jump out of a damn airplane, right? So in our world, it's the same thing. You have certain things that you're capable of doing, and you want to be able to execute. The politics just wasn't there. Every single time is the political ramifications at the time, and it was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking for me. I'm very proud of my agency. I am very proud of my service with the agency.
Right.
I had incredible leaders for the most part. But when the politics kicks in, Mike Scheuer suffered under it, and the American people suffer under it because Bin Laden did what he was able to do because we didn't stop him when we could have.
You mentioned it went to the vice president, but this is not a vice presidential decision. This is an executive decision. Do you, in your heart of hearts, believe that the lack of action was the fault of the president of the United States?
No. I think that the lack of action was my upper echelon leaders not really selling the program. The program briefs so well. You go to somebody and say, hey, look at the capability we have. We have 3 bad guys in every organization that is targeted, and we can put the button on them at any given time and disrupt them. That briefs, who doesn't want to have that in their pocket, in their toolbox, right? So I think that it wasn't, and it was the vice president that spoke to us, but his attorney was there. The president's attorney was there because it was Bush that signed the lethal finding on 17 September. And this program came and was, brought up to be part of that lethal finding that was signed in 17 September 2001.
So you've lived through this quagmire of inaction, right? September 11th happens. What's going through your head when you're seeing the news of this attack?
Well, that's just like yourself. The impact that had on every red, white, and blue American was eviscerating. More so for guys like us we knew that if this was Bin Laden, we might have been able to prevent this. But at the moment, you don't go back into history. You don't go back, and you go to the future. You start planning on how do we get to find out who it was and everything else. And, we all remember where we are, where we were, and what we were doing when 9/11 happened. And I thank you for your service. And you yourself mentioned to me earlier that you entered the military after 9/11. Well, I will tell you again because I love highlighting the quality of my fellow officers, right? We had 3 paramilitary guys that had left the agency, were all working in private sector, 6 figures.
Making big money, yeah.
Big money. And on 9/12, they were at our door saying, I will bring you coffee. I will clean toilets. Let me back in.
Right.
And we had there were several dozens of people that came back that had retired or had resigned that came back because they needed to be in the fight. I will never forget, John O'Neill was a guy that I got to know. He was the senior FBI guy, and then eventually he was the guy in charge of security for the Twin Towers. And he died saving people in there. So it was personal in so many cases, in so many different phases. But the fact that the president knew that this capability existed, the vice president knew, Condoleezza Rice knew, and the fact that they were not revisited. Come on, when you're the president of anything, you have to have people come to you and say, "Hey, remember that thing that I told you about?" No, refresh my memory, because there's so many you could put in your rucksack. And that was the criminal. Me and my guys were pretty much convinced that if it would have been gone up to the White House, we would have gotten the green light to do at least one of these operations. But it never happened. So
immediately after, we realized that it actually was an attack, did your gut tell you that it was Osama bin Laden?
Yeah, I mean, again, because, before being the chief of ops, I had been the chief of international terrorism. So I knew about Hezbollah, everything else, and we were pretty sure, but we had no real proof on the onset. And there's a vignette in the book that I love telling, because this young lady was the deputy chief of the Hezbollah branch. And Christy was 7 or 8 months pregnant when 9/11 happened. Every federal building was evacuated, including CIA.
Right.
Except for the counterterrorist center. We had a full house of volunteers that said, "We're not going anywhere." So 7:00 at night, I'm making the rounds, trying to catch my second breath. I slept there for 3 days before going home. And I see Christy at the computer, and I walk up to her and go, "What the hell are you doing here?" And she was a very, energetic young lady. And he looks at me and says, "Boss," says, "remember that until today, Hezbollah had killed more Americans than anybody else. We cannot rule them out. And that's what I'm here to prove." And I said, "Well, that's very noble of you, but you're also 8 months pregnant. I've delivered 2 kids before.
Right.
None of them are mine. And I ain't delivering a third. So you're getting your ass home." So I had one of my logs guys take her home. The reason I love that story, though, Nicholas, is we all know what the maternal instinct is.
Right.
Imagine a young woman who's 7.5, 8 months pregnant, sitting at a computer in a building that, for all we knew, could have been next.
Right.
And overriding the maternal instinct of protecting that child in your belly to prove or disprove that it was your account, that you didn't miss anything, or that you did miss something, but here's what we can do about it. If that doesn't describe the ethos, completely contrary to Jason Bourne and all this other crap, she's a poster child for what an operations officer, female on top of that. Not because, she was a great operations officer, not a great female operations officer.
Right.
She was a damn good operations officer. And she told me later, I said, after I had the baby, I would always think of you on her birthday, because what was I thinking? Well, you were thinking with your patriotic heart, not your maternal heart. So
earlier, Rick, you mentioned those 140 stars on the wall at CIA headquarters in Langley. What do those mean to you now that you've had this incredible career and had time to reflect?
They mean the world to me, and I'll explain why. We had like you said, we have 140 stars, but almost a third of those are post 9/11.
Wow.
Guys like Mike Spann, Jennifer Matthews. These are people that I knew personally. Jennifer Matthews was a plank owner of the Bin Laden task force. She was one of the youngest analysts we had when we started UBL, Alex Station. So, that is the very foundation of the sacrifice that we make, because we all make a lot of sacrifices. We risk our lives. We put our family through incredible amount of stuff. We move our families every 2 or 3 years. But we just had Memorial Day, and that day is dedicated to those individuals that, even among the 1% of the 2% that serves, not everybody dies. And these are people that actually pay the ultimate price. Many of them are anonymous. There's a lot of the stars there are not identified because sources or methods we can't. They've been opening up a little bit more every time, and I think that's good. But it means the world to me. And like I mentioned earlier, it is one of the primary reasons why I wrote the book is I felt I owed them a debt of honor because some of these people we sent into harm's way, just like we were sent into harm's way ourselves, and if they don't come back, you owe them a debt of gratitude because they've made a hell of a sacrifice and that family has made a hell of a sacrifice. So I just wanted, the wives, the mothers, the children of some of these stars to be able to go, oh, so this is how the agency actually works. Or this is the kind of person my daddy was or my grandfather was. They mean the world to me.
Yeah. That's certainly a special place in the building, and you always, pay attention to it whenever you walk by. So appreciate the insight there. You've been to a lot of countries all over the world, in various circumstances of how stable they are in terms of their government. Are there any commonalities to all these places that you've been to, these operations that you've been involved in?
Well, I mean, the commonality was the fact that they were part of the intelligence game, whether it was more kinetic like it was during the Contras, or almost kinetic as it was almost in the Philippines. It was still the basic recruiting, developing, running, coordinating with the local services. And I think that I gravitated to the places where things are happening. And it was funny because I went from, I was in the Nicaragua Contra stuff. I got my master's in espionage. I was sent to Costa Rica. From Costa Rica, I went to another Latin American country that I'm not allowed to mention, but it was my first counterterrorism assignment. And from there, they asked me, and I accepted to go to the Philippines. So the shrinks in the building actually called me in. From our Office of Medical Services, they called me in and they said, "Yeah, we just want to see why you're going from tour to tour to tour. You got kids, I go, I thought that's what I was supposed to do."
Right.
It was my bosses that came to me and say, "Hey, would you be interested in this?" I'm going like, "Hell yeah." So go ahead.
So those assignments were brought to you. You didn't like pick them out of a hat or anything.
Actually, in my case, I would venture to say that just about all. I don't remember ever saying, the only place that I wanted to go to was Japan. I was a big Japanophile, and I even studied Japanese for a while. And my assignment got changed to the Koreas, so I never got to go to Japan. But I didn't go to Korea not by choice. I never thought about going to Korea. I wanted to go to Japan.
Right.
But again, the chief of station in Seoul asked for me by name. The division chief pitched me, even though I've been studying for 14 months, a different language. And it's funny because when it kind of dictates my whole life. I asked him one question. I said, "Can you tell me about this special program that he wants me to run?" He goes, "No, I can't." I said, "I'll take it." Because with my clearances, if you can't tell me what the hell the special program is
it's
about,
going to be something good, right?
That's where I want to be. And the rest is history. So, I think throughout my career, I never put in for something for a political, okay, if I do this, it's going to get me promoted. I just wanted to make a difference. Again, because of my childhood, as you know from reading the book, I was born in Cuba, came to the United States to an orphanage, joined the military at the age of 20. This country has done everything for my family, including my kids. Right. So for me, the mission, the action is the juice. Well, but the mission was the purpose. And when you combine the two of them, you get to have a lot of fun.
Earlier, you talked a lot about this kind of political quagmire of inaction, how there was not the political will to take action prior to 9/11, but after 9/11, there seemed to be a lot of will for things like drone strikes. Yeah. Why is it more palatable to kill someone with a Hellfire missile than a bullet to the head.
It's hypocrisy.
Elsewhere.
It is hypocrisy. It's political hypocrisy. Don't get me wrong. I'm a big proponent of the drones, and as you know, again from the story, I pulled the trigger on one that wiped out about 17 of these jerks, and it's another weapon. I totally agree. But what you got to realize is that when you use a drone on a target, there's always collateral damage. Nobody that's worthy of being a target is going to be driving himself through the Sahara Desert. He's going to have bodyguards and cousins, or they're going to be at a wedding or whatever the hell it is that they hit. So you're always going to have collateral damage that plays right into their game. That's the strike number one. Strike number two is when we go physically hands-on on a target, like we did in Iraq, like we did in Afghanistan with, working with our special operations forces. When we hit a house to get a high-value target, that wasn't the only thing that we got. We got every computer. We got every notebook. We got every TV, every DVR, every record, everything that we could get, come back and analyze, all source analysis. And that was another thing that you cannot do post a hellfire up your trunk of your car. Yeah. So you end up pissing off a lot more people. Getting this guy had 12 cousins, and now they're all radicalized because you killed their senior cousin or whatever. But I go back to what I said earlier. What if I would have been able to put a bullet in Hitler's face in 1939?
Right.
How many millions of people would be alive in this country if that would have happened? So it carries on. I don't talk politics. Notice I haven't mentioned any president by name. But I think one thing that I do that does concern me is the fact that we as Americans, we have it so good that we don't know how we don't know how good we have it, to tell you the truth, and we have this naive sense of safety. And when you look at who our enemies are, they're all predators. They're all vicious predators, and you cannot fight a predator with the morality of a sheep. You have to yourself be a wolf. So what happens is, and I'll use this as a historical, because again, I don't like talking politics. I'm an intel officer, not a politician, but I do like history. And when Jimmy Carter took over, Jimmy Carter, former military, he was a Navy admiral, brilliant, religious, well-meaning. He did incredible humanitarian stuff post his presidency. Not corrupt, a very decent individual, but he was naive, he was weak, and he came across as food. And when you're sitting across the table from predators, look what happened. The Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan right after he took over. The Iranians captured our hostages out of the embassy for 444 days. Gave away the Panama Canal. Was trying to pull the troops out of South Korea, all because it's a benign world. Let's show let's be friendly and see that a snake is a snake, a predator is a predator, and sooner or later it's going to eat you. And look what happened when Reagan took over. As soon as Reagan was sworn in, they released our hostages in Iran. I wonder why.
It's like Jack Nicholson said in A Few Good Men, you want me on that wall, you need me on that wall, you gotta take people like that to defend what we have. And speaking of predators, probably the largest predator in the world right now would be Vladimir Putin, and what's happening with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Recently, the CIA released this video, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this video. But basically, the video is them trying to recruit people willing to provide insight into the Russian government, or how people are on the ground. What are your thoughts on this? Just open espionage.
Well, look, it's first of all a sign of the times. It's like podcast is something that's fairly new, and look how wildfire that has become. But this is nothing new. I will tell you, before the fall of the Soviet Union, it wasn't advertised in a movie, but what we were cold pitching Russians, Soviets, was I say, listen, you come to work for me today, you get a Rolex and a house in Virginia. You come to try to work for me after your place crumbles, and we're going to give you a quarter so you could call somebody who gives a damn.
Right.
And this is what this message is in a much more sophisticated way. Remember, I mentioned to you that we like to recruit on strengths. Well, what bigger strength that you are a Russian citizen and your son just died in Ukraine, right, and this idiot keeps doing the kind of stuff that he's doing, and and the kind of pressures that puts on his own people, the famine, every negative thing that you could throw. You don't think this guy has all the positive qualities for being somebody that can say, I've had enough. I got to do something about this. So that's what that video was all about. I think that it was brilliant, but it's not new. It was just a modern version of something that we have always done. When you see an enemy with cracks and the population starts to rise, that's where our intelligence really grows.
You were mentioning about kind of the Eastern philosophy versus the Western philosophy, how we've, in some of my previous podcasts, I've had people call the upcoming generation soft. I had a school teacher on recently, and he talked about the TikTokification of America and all that good stuff, and all that's fine and dandy. We know the military right now is struggling to recruit. They're struggling to hit their recruiting numbers. Do you fear that we're not going to have what it takes to perform high stakes intelligence operations like Ric Prado in the future?
I think it's going to be a little harder. There's the old saying, there's two old sayings. One is, if you want peace, prepare for war. Right. And that is very true. You have to be able to have a posture that dissuades somebody from attacking you, whether you're a government or whether you're a parent protecting your house or your family. And we have so many good people in the military. I taught at Fort Bragg for 7 years, a program called Advanced Special Operations and Tactics. And I eight times a year I was there helping teach this course. And I loved doing it. The pay sucked. Fayetteville sucks. But I loved it because it really renewed my faith in American youth. I had guys in there that were in their 30s, 4 or 5 combat tours, beautiful families, go to church on Sundays, right? Bullet holes in them. And they come back and one day, hey, I just got the news. I'm going to Syria next week. And you sit there and you go, wow, that's humble. The problem is you got to continue to feed that pipeline. And it's a pretty anorexic pipeline as it is. You're talking 2%, and this is a compliment to you, 2% of the population of the United States at any given time goes into the military, serves in the military. So let's make it 4 or 5%, because I always like to include my law enforcement brethren, because they do the same thing. So you got 95%, right, that is really contributing in different kinds of ways and then really going into harm's way. Right. So that brings it around. I don't think we'll have a shortage of warriors, because I see them every day. But long term, this is where the second adage is that, tough times make tough men make good times make soft men. So unfortunately, we're at that cycle. We criticize ourselves mainly because we don't know what to compare ourselves with. The average American doesn't travel anywhere that they can contrast to. I had a lady one day on this argument said, well, I've been to Mexico, and I took a wild guess and I was right. I said, no, ma'am, you went to Cancun on a cruise. Right. It's not going to Mexico. You were not in Guadalajara. You were not in, in whatever. And it's true. Most Americans have no idea the contrast. Well, even European cities.
Mhm.
Yeah, we go to Paris. We stay in a nice hotel. We go to fantastic restaurant. Oh, the Eiffel Tower. We try to go to the DMV in one of these countries like Italy.
Right.
And these are first world countries. When you get into second and third world countries, and when you get into communist dominated or what is it, the dictatorial regimes,
Right.
the quality of life is zero. Most of the problems that our young have are all first world problems. My iPad doesn't work. I don't have reception here. Oh, I got bumped off of Facebook.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons behind the struggles that the military is currently seeing, and obviously that bleeds into the intelligence agencies because a lot of the intelligence agencies are made up of people in the military that come out and serve in a different capacity. Earlier, you mentioned we talked about the Contras a bit about the heartbreaking personal stories that these people had that kind of drove them to action. Do you fear that unless Americans are personally affected by either communist or some type of socialist system, that we would be apathetic towards any type of push politically in that direction? Like, do we have to live through those things personally before we realize, yeah, this stuff is no good. We can't have that here.
I hear that a lot. There's a lot of people that subscribe to that theory. I have two sons, both are military. I won't go any further than that. So when somebody starts talking about putting boots on the ground, it ain't Ric Prado putting boots on the ground anymore. It's Ric Prado's puppies putting boots on the ground. And that really changes the perspective. So I am not a hawk in that sense that we need to be attacking the Iranians. What we need is a posture that tells the enemy that if you mess with me, I will bite back, and it's got to be credible. And I go back to the example of Regan with the Iranians. They knew that he was going to go from I swear to I push a button. And they were going to turn the place into a parking lot and get our guys out. So, a lot of people subscribe. I hear this, people say, well, I hate to say this, but what we need is another 9/11.
Oh,
I hear people say that all the time. And I go, well, yes.
Not cool.
The 9/11 did coalesce our backbone and got us going but that's not what you want. What if it's your kids are in that building that gets hit in 9/22, whatever it is?
Right.
So I think that what we need is to get leaders that are leaders, not just politicians, that have the best interests of this country, that support our military and our law enforcement. This, defund police is some of the stupidest things I've ever seen in my life. And it does scare me because I am the product of a communist country. I saw what communism did to my family. I saw people hanging from trees because they had talked bad about Castro.
Right.
With my own eyes. I was 10 years old. So for me, it's scary to think that people are dancing with socialism and not looking at internally how proud we should be of what we stand for. Do we have flaws? Absolutely. Is racism bad? Absolutely. What all the isms are bad, right? Terrorism, but it just goes on and on. But we are still the best country and the one country that defends the world. I always tell people, I said, I hope God doesn't forsake the United States, because the day that he or she, turns off on the United States, he's turned off on the world. Because we are that singular power that goes out there. Right. And of course, we have our great British allies and our Australian allies and our Thais and you name it, Polish. We have a lot of good allies. But I don't think that any of those countries are willing and or able to take point in these kind of things.
Well, there's certainly a reason why we have an immigration problem, right? There's a reason why there's so many people trying to come here, because they do have opportunity here. And I want to touch on this a bit because I'm just starting to see this everywhere. I'm starting to see this diversity, equity, and inclusion all over the intelligence community, up and down the ranks. And I just saw something the other day. It was, I actually think it was very nicely worded. This is from the Public Affairs Office at the CIA. Her name is Tammy Thorpe. It says, last year we reached historic highs in hiring women and minority officers, as well as officers with disabilities. And we promoted into our senior ranks the highest percentages of women and minority officers in our 75-year history, demonstrating that there is a pathway to the top for anyone whose work merits it, whatever their background. So a couple of things there. One, she mentions the word merit right in there, which to me, you could take all that other stuff out of there and put merit right at the top. Is there a place for this in the intelligence community?
There is, and I will tell you why. First of all, I would bitch slap whoever said that I was a good or great Hispanic case officer. I was a damn good case officer, period. My ethnicity or my race, I'm white, Hispanic, whatever the hell you want to call it, that doesn't fall into the equation. I do believe that we need to do better at recruiting with diversity because that's what our job is. I mean, we do not work against the United States or within the United States. So having people that have foreign cultures, foreign languages, foreign appearances who are Americans, this is why I'm so big on recruiting from the military, because you talk about the melting pot in the United States. A lot of it is the military. People that come in there from all walks of life, from all backgrounds, and they're doing patriotic things. So the inclusion of minorities and that diversity, I cheer that. But it's like any time that you go in harm's way, it's important that you know that the person next to you and behind you are there with you. And so it's a matter of not lowering the bar for that particular mission. Now, the mission of the agency and the mission of the Green Berets is extremely different. There's a lot of commonalities, wins, hearts, and minds, and recruit and all that other stuff. But, there's different venues into getting into higher management, whether you're a female or Hispanic or anything else. To tell you the truth, I did almost 25 years in the agency. And I personally, as a Spanish-speaking native, from another country who came to this country legally, I've never felt that I was discriminated against or looked down the nose on me at all. I honestly felt that people saw what I was willing and able to do. And that's why I went from a GS7 to an SIS2 in 24 years.
And this has been my chief argument as well, is that when you're focused on a mission, when you have a core mission that you're a part of, whether that's running a business or in the military or in an intelligence agency somewhere, when you're really focused on a mission, you just want the best people. You want the best people, and you don't the skin color doesn't matter, sexual organ, sexual preference, none of that stuff actually matters when we're trying to accomplish a mission. Obviously, I'm all in on having a fair playing field. It's just, it's probably the thing that gets me the most is the E in DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So now you're supposed to magically promote someone just because of their skin color or appoint them to an office because they're of a certain gender. I don't agree with that. Now, the thing about this statement, which I find interesting, is that she goes through and mentions all these things about recruiting women, and at the very end says, for anyone whose work merits it. Now, to me, it's like a brilliant, because what you're saying is that we run a merit-based organization, but we're paying attention to this stuff as well. So I think it was actually a very well worded statement, because it's almost, you can't ignore this stuff that's happening. It's everywhere in our corporations, through our schools and universities. But I think this was actually something. It seems to me like the CIA is kind of saying here, like, yeah, here's our statement on this. Like, we're doing really well. When I worked there, all my bosses were women. I was like, we don't care. We're on the same mission. Like we're doing good work, and we just want to do the best work we can. All right, so maybe let's switch gears a little bit. Obviously, you have a really cool book here. And like I mentioned, we'll put the links in the description so you can check out the book. But you're also wearing a hat, so I wonder if maybe you can talk about your hat a bit.
Yeah, this is a bourbon company that was started by 4 former military guys. 2 of them were friends of mine from the past, and they came to me, and I'm not a paid spokesman for them. I don't make a dime off of them. But I just believe in their product because their bourbon is superb, and I'm a bourbon drinker, and I always told them, I said, this is the first bourbon other than Pappy Van Winkle that I can drink without an ice cube in it. It's that smooth. But the beauty of it is called 4 branches because one guy is Army, one guy is Air Force, one guy is a Marine, one guy is Navy. And we're all talking, pararescue, we're talking Navy SEAL, we're talking Marine Raider type guys, and Army Green Beret. So they're 4 special operations guys who have come together post-retirement to put this thing together. A lot of the money that are the main charity for us is the third option. Third option, as you know from your background, is the agency's what is it, Wounded Warriors kind of program. This is for the wives, the family, the parents, the kids of our agency operators who get disabled or get hurt. So it is a very patriotic effort. As a matter of fact, the back of the hat says "Served honorably, drink honorably," and that is, is meant for that. Understand the service. It's not just military. It's not just police. Everybody contributes in the way that they can. You're a good example of that. You've done it in the military. You've done it in the community. Now you're also doing this that helps get certain word out to the right people. That is service in my book. So I thank you for that. That's a nice trifecta to have. But
thankfully,
I'm very honored that these guys are asked me to be one of their ambassadors. Their other ambassador is Randy Couture, who's a 6-time world champion, UFC guy.
Now you're talking my language.
Yep. Yeah. Well, actually, I when we did the grand opening, him and I were together there for quite a bit and got to know him fairly well. He was always one of my favorites. But the point is, this is an effort by 4 American patriots to produce a product that is really exceptional, but with the morality that goes behind it. We have the right message. One of the things that we did at the grand opening was we had the fallen officer table. We went through that whole process of the glass upside down and the plate and empty and all this kind of stuff. It runs very deep in the ethos of this organization. So you have the combination of great people doing great things and a product that actually sells itself outside of it. So that's why I put them out.
Definitely check that out. 4 Branches Bourbon is the name, and we'll post links in the description, of course.
Thank you,
Rick. When you're traveling somewhere to a foreign country, and you just need to have something at your disposal to keep you safe, what would be your weapon of choice? Like if you had the access to any weapon on earth, like what would be the thing that like I'm taking that with me?
Well, that's a fantasy kind of thing. I mean, yeah,
sure.
If I could travel with an MP5 SD, I would be the happiest guy in the world. Best for me. That's the best up close and personal gun. But the reality is, when we travel overseas, we do not have the luxury of carrying a lot of weapons. I am not a gun guy in the sense of collecting. I am a gun guy in the sense of that I can outshoot most people, especially with a handgun. I got the tactics. I have all that. But when you travel overseas, especially in our world, carrying a gun is the last resort. It's not like a police officer who always has to have that hand on the handgun because they have an imminent threat in front of them. But they're working in their own turf. We work in somebody else's turf. So for us, when we're doing it professionally, we may have a weapon, but it's not something we resort to immediately. I personally, I carry a SIG 365 macro, and I have a 365 regular. I'm a big Glock guy. I own every 9mm Glock because I believe that there's no gun for all seasons or holsters for all reasons. In the Philippines, I used to carry a 38 in my ankle because that's what I could get away with going into the hotels. But for the person that's traveling overseas as a civilian, first, the biggest tool that you have is your brain in being aware.
Sure.
My Philippines incident, read it in the book. If I had not had me and my partner, my buddy Davis, if we had not seen the threat and reacted to the threat before they could threaten us, I wouldn't be having this conversation with you. So the other things is I always carry a knife. Knife is something you can buy anywhere or go to a restaurant and take it or whatever it is. A knife is a hell of a weapon. Flashlight, a good flashlight with a nice poker in the front. I carry one of those everywhere I go. That's, if I go out at night and I don't have a gun because I'm in a country where, it's not the United States, I carry the flashlight and a knife, and most importantly, my awareness. So
I just want to prep people that I did not tell Rick this question at all. He just got a library of answers here ready. That's really cool. So you got this book out here. You're doing a bunch of podcasts. You're going all over the place. I would be shocked if I know there's probably some movies that intersect it, but who do you want to play Ric Prado in the Ric Prado movie?
Well, I get asked that a lot, and the first time I was asked, I kiddingly said, "Well, how about Danny DeVito?" And everybody cracked up.
All right.
No, we do have some oars in the water for different media. My dream media would be a good documentary, 5-6 episodes that actually carries the book. Cool. Because, like I said, my pride is my career, and author is not my career. I'm not a career author. I don't have the interest in writing additional books. I may or may not, but right now I don't. So it is basically trying to continue to contribute in any way that I can. And if a documentary or an adventure series or something comes in and is successful and it helps promote my book further and get the word out further, that's what really floats my boat.
Very good. So if you have any ideas for who should play Rick, make sure you throw those in the comments. And I don't know, maybe I'll give something out to the best comment, the best option. Who knows?
There you go.
I'm always all about doing that.
Give him a bottle of bourbon.
Oh, there we go. I will personally buy a bottle of 4 Branches and send it to whoever has the best response in the comments. Mark my words there. Let's, we talk a lot about these operations and things like that, but you're a person, you're a human being that's done all these amazing things. What role has love played in your life?
Well, love is everything. I mean, my love for God, my love for my country, and my family. That's, at the end of the day, that's what you fight for. I am blessed with a wonderful family. I had incredible parents. My first hero was my dad. So I think love does make the world go round. You just have to understand that even love has a price of admission, and you have to, love for country, you have to serve it. Love for your family, you have to be loyal to it. You have to be, you have to provide. You have to guide your family in the right way with your children. So, yeah, I'm a firm believer. I'm a hopeless romantic. I really am. For a knuckle dragger, especially. So yeah, I think that's a very important quality in anybody. It should be part of your soul.
And you do touch on it in the book quite a bit, which I just wanted to mention that it's not there. There is some great stories in there. Definitely check it out. Go to ricprado.com, RICPRADO.com. We'll make sure we put all the links in the description. Scroll down, click that stuff. Make sure you're following Rick on all his Twitters and all those things. My name's Nick. This is the NDS show. I want to appreciate everybody for listening. Rick, I'm gonna leave it with you, man. Let send us off in a good way. What message do you have for the world?
Keep the faith, grow some backbone.
Keep the faith, grow some backbone. Take care, y'all.